Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the thematic track of Unlocking Potential Emerging Energy Resources. Uh, I want to thank ADB and the organizers for providing a forum to dive more deeply into this subject of the realities of scaling up clean energy technology in the age of uncertainty. So if you take a long-term look at this, when you while wind and solar and EVs have successfully scaled up really over the last 2 decades, the reason is we've had manufacturing, R&D, and supply chain investments with tremendous consistent policy and consumer sentiments. Energy innovations in the hard to decarbonize sector are just starting this journey, and the planet does not have 2 decades to wait. Now, broadly speaking, there's 4 major innovation technology clusters: green molecules, thermal, firm renewable energy, and emissions capture. I'm honored today that we have speakers of this distinguished panel who will talk to 3 of these areas. For green molecules, we're going to have 2 speakers. We have Charmaine Tan of Boeing, who's the Regional Sustainability Coordinator for Southeast Asia and leader. She's also joined by Sachin Narang from GHD, who's led a groundbreaking study they're going to present today on Southeast Asia. And in addition, we have Ron Hoffman, who is the VP of Business Development for 6-Ring, a really breakthrough kind of technology in the green molecules space. Next, we're going to cover thermal. And thermal is often overlooked as a critical element of decarbonization. So we're absolutely thrilled to have, again, we're going to have 2 speakers on the same presentation. Ilka Lewington, who's the head of markets and regulation for the Dornier Group, and her colleague, Tim Novak, who's the lead engineer around this area of district thermal. And then our final speaker, Bagus Mudatonero of Castle Rock Consulting, is going to discuss the economic realities of solar hybridization at best using Indonesia as a case study. So collectively, please give me a warm welcome and gratitude for our speakers. I'm Kyle Dada, your moderator, representing the U.S. financing and advisory firm Teneo in the Pacific region. I want to start by framing the challenges of scaling up clean energy innovation. We'll take these themes through the presentation. Fundamentally, energy technologies are capital intensive, with often a high minimum efficient scale. So to achieve financing and really get these technologies moving, you have to address a wide variety of risks: technical, commercial, market, legal, and policy. All either have to be mitigated or transferred and allocated. Now, to ABD's credit, this year, there's an entire parallel track that focuses on financing and de-risking, which is really around risk transfer and allocation. This panel is going to focus on risk mitigation, which is not financial engineering, it's deeper. So that means that the scaling model actually matters. How are we going to do this? How are these technologies going to grow in the marketplace? And that pathway may have to be dynamic given that we're in the age of uncertainty with policy changes and macro trade changes. But there's a huge difference between technologies that leverage the existing energy infrastructure and technologies that have to create their own energy infrastructure. And in the green molecules case, just as an example, when hydrogen is transformed into a drop-in fuel or drop-in chemical, it's very easy to accelerate that in the existing energy infrastructure. If it has to create its own entire logistics chain and transportation pathway, it takes a lot longer. Then there's the fundamental question of the customers, ultimately the bankability of contracts. And so here, the reality is you have to have a contract with a debt tenure that matches both requirements for the commercial banks, but also collectively in magnitude achieve the debt service coverage ratio. It's fundamental to getting anything project financed. And it's probably the scarcest resource is actually customers that are willing to pay for these new technologies or pay a premium for these new technologies and the outputs. And then finally, because of that, There are very, very few com companies that can do this alone. It really takes partnerships. Uh, and that's really across the whole supply chain, from raw materials to logistics to the customers, sometimes to their customers, and then you can bring in the financial institutions. So uh, we're going to discuss these themes in the presentations, but also in the Q&A. These are some of the economic realities of scaling and unlocking the innovation. For the audience, I want you to think about what you want to get out of this session, and then either use the app to send questions to me, the moderator, or feel free to use the microphones when the Q&A session comes. So we're very excited around that. So let me provide the chair to Sachin, who will start speaking around the larger Asia Pacific region and the SAF potential.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Kyle, and thank you very much for everyone's joining, spending their valuable time joining us today. What a great event ADB has hosted for us. We're quite excited to share some insights on one of our key studies that we've conducted. And before I start, just wanted to acknowledge some key stakeholders, and first being the project sponsor, the Canadian Trade Investment Facility for Development for this particular study, the ASEAN Secretariat as the key beneficiary, and then last but definitely not least, Boeing, our key and integral knowledge partner for this assessment, which we're fortunate to have Charmaine Tan, Boeing's regional sustainability lead in Southeast Asia, playing a key focus. So we'll move on. And just a bit of a background on our study. We focused on agricultural and forestry waste feedstocks in countries Cambodia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, and Philippines in no particular order. And you can see the work streams that we've covered there. For today, to lay the foundation, what we'll go through is some key insights into the feedstock assessment, and then the technology selection and the real dilemma that we have at the moment. So the feedstock assessment, which is actually considered the quintessential component of any SAF feasibility or viability assessment. And what we've found is there is an abundance of sustainable aviation fuel feedstock within these countries that we've studied. And we're talking in megatons per year. And you can see there that Indonesia and Thailand are the highest and quite high, closely followed by countries such as Malaysia, Philippines, and Vietnam. Now, what we also did as part of this study is we identified hotspots for these feedstock availabilities, and you can see that in the figure there. And what we see is there's multiple hotspots, which we believe is quite important, as Carl mentioned, when we talk about growing these and developing SAFs at economies of scale, and also optimize the supply chain. And then other factors such as what we found in Southeast Asia is factors such as seasonality also enhance the feedstock availability. So that's a very promise, or a key promising aspect for the growth of sustainable aviation fuels within this region. Now, it helps to visualize the feedstocks when what we're talking about, and feedstocks such as cassava, rice that you can see there, corn, palm oil residues, and not coconut and non-standard coconut. These are very much available feedstocks that we've found across the region, and definitely in line with CORSIA feedstock categories as well. Now here's the technology dilemma, and some of our audience might be familiar with some of these technologies, but what we want to do is just paint a bit of the picture of these different technologies and where they're strong and where they're weak or not as up to speed. So when we talk about the first one, we're talking about HEFA, hydroprocessed esters and fatty acids. Now, it's sometimes known as the fat way of reducing SAFs, and the reason it's called fat is it typically uses animal fats or used cooking oils or palm oil and those type of feedstocks. It's the most mature, and essentially it is using these feedstocks and reacting it with hydrogen in a process called hydrogenation, and it changes the molecular structure, which is pretty close to conventional aviation fuel. It's the most mature, and in terms of capex, the lowest out of the other ones. But you're probably thinking, okay, what's wrong with this? And it's actually the feedstock availability for this particular technology pathway, and that's where we go into the dilemma, and we look into other technology pathways. And there are a few. So just some examples. We go into the alcohol to jet. Now this alcohol to jet is, in a nice way, it's the grain way. So it's taking grain like feedstocks and actually fermenting it into an alcohol and then dehydrating it for the fuel. Now, if you want to picture it, it's similar to, say, beer production. It's that type of process. There's the alcohol to, then there's the Fischer-Tropsch. And the Fischer-Tropsch technology, that's commonly known as maybe the waste type or the waste method, which is actually a nice one where we're using the waste, gasifying it, producing syngas, and then feeding that syngas into a Fischer-Tropsch reactor. Now, those two, alcohol to jet and Fischer-Tropsch, you're probably thinking, how does that fit in? It actually has more feedstock compatibility, or a variety of more feedstocks. Where its limitation is, or where it's the dilemma is it's that rung below in terms of TRL, or technology readiness level and maturity, and the capex and cost is slightly higher. And then there's the hydrothermal liquefaction. Hydrothermal liquefaction is an interesting one. It's actually, its superpower is actually treating feedstocks that are wet, because you don't need to dry it, and actually uses the water at high temperature and pressure to break down biomass into biocrude. This one here is then a rung below in terms of maturity and is actually not ASTM certified yet, but we do think that's imminent. So that's a bit of an overview of the technology selection. We'll skip through a few of these slides. Just wanted to paint a bit of a picture. We've talked quite technically, and then we want to just provide a bit of a foundation. Okay, we've got a lot of feedstock. There's technology out there, and they're varying in maturity and capex. Then how does policy come in? And we believe that the policy is integral in terms of further igniting SAF. So it's always good to reference the current policy regulation or points used or strategies used around the world, and this might come on in the panel as well. And I like to look at it as the carrot or the stick. And when we talk about the US case, that's the carrot. They're looking to try and incentivize use of SAFs through credits on saved carbon emissions or carbon intensity, and then the European region is using the stick, which is using mandates and targets on the demand side, and mandating blend rate at certain airports within the region. So that's just wanted to lay the foundation. We've got a full report link included in these slides, which please, I hope these slides can be shared, or we can also share it if interested via emails or other avenues. So I hope that lays a good foundation, and pass on to our distinguished speakers coming up. So thank you again, and really appreciate the time taken. Thank you.
One of the really interesting things about this study that was jointly done with Boeing is it has good news, but also lays down the gauntlet. So the good news is we actually have abundant, low-cost, low carbon intensity feedstocks for SAF that could actually meet the regional demand in the near term, and actually allow our airlines here in this region to meet their CORSIA commitments, which is the international treaty. So that's the good news. But there's always a rub to everything. The challenging news is that the economies of scale of a lot of these emerging technologies that can use these biomass they're very capital intensive. So if you start small, they're very expensive in terms of the cost of the SAF, which may exceed the ability to actually scale it up. So that means either it has to have a lot of market pull, or we have to have some new innovations using the same feedstocks. So on that note, I'm very honored to have the next speaker come and talk to us, Ron Hoffman from Citrin, actually former ambassador. Ron Hoffman, who has a number of wonderful roles in the Canadian Diplomatic Corps. He's going to speak to us about their technology and the kind of breakthrough innovation it can have in this exact same space. So Ron, look forward to your talk.
Thanks, Al. That's where I used to be a diplomat, so now I have to work for a living. So we just heard that what we all know is that this region has a rich supply of aggregated feedstocks that have inherent value and inherent energy in those molecules. A challenge is that most prevailing technologies have not been able to apply themselves for broad-based conversion of that biomass into affordable fuels available to the market. We heard some of the reasons why. I mean, I'll just repeat some of them and expand on it. I mean, there's a perception that there's a perception in current biofuels that they compete with food production or that they displace agriculture for products that don't move into food supply chains. They tend to be high energy, high pressure systems. They require pre-feedstock or pre-treatment of feedstocks. One of the challenges is that as part of the processing and the high heat and high pressure, there tends to be a destruction of some of the valuable components of those feedstocks, particularly the lignin. There's often limited product output, high capex, as Kyle said, need for very large facilities to hit scale, so consequently high product costs, and because of the high product costs, a dependency on subsidies. So 5 to 6 years ago, the company that I joined was a company that specialized in modified acids for all kinds of industrial uses. So it was mostly PhDs and chemists and engineers, and they kind of looked at this problem and said, there must be a better, simpler way of being able to get access to that biomass and convert that at lower cost, larger amounts, to be able to actually make a real dent in the biofuel market. So they developed a 6-ring process, proprietary process based on over 50 patents that at its core does not use energy or heat or pressure in the process. It's an ambient temperature process. It also is based on, it has an ability basically to be feedstock agnostic. It doesn't use food-based feedstocks, so the fats that we just heard about. It uses lignocellulosic feedstocks, and it basically is unlimited in terms of which of those feedstocks it can use. It can even mix those feedstocks. Importantly, because it does not destroy any of the valuable molecules in the core biomass constituents, it means it produces multiple products. So you have feedstock optionality and you have product optionality. So if one particular product is struggling in the market with prices or the market is shifting, it can move to other products, but it can also help the overall economics by carving out some of the feedstock molecules into high value products that can help subsidize the other products. And because it doesn't use heat and pressure, it is very, very simple engineering, which I'll get into a little bit more in a moment. You know this, the challenge that most technologies have had is the lignin component of the biomass. So through a catalytic oxidative depolymerization process, and I'm not a chemist, so I really had to work on that, we basically convert that lignin into a biocrude, which preserves the valuable molecules. What are some of the advantages of an ambient temperature core process? Again, low capex, low opex, CI is low because you're not burning a lot of energy. You got very high yields because you're not destroying any of the molecules, and you produce multiple products. Now this is a little bit of simplification because we actually have many more products than this, but at its core, the biocrude can produce a range of drop-in fuels without refining, and the cellulose, two main outputs that we're focusing on in the short term is converting to cellulosic ethanol at high yield, but it also is a very, very strong catalyst in anaerobic digesters because the microbial communities really, really like the highly structured, accessible cellulose that's unaltered because it doesn't face heat. But we also have platform chemicals and fine chemicals from both of these streams, as well as MCC and NCC that we can pull out to help the overall economics by moving into some of the high value markets. Importantly, going back to the simplicity of engineering, which means low capex and low risk, the six-ring process only accounts for about 20% of the overall capex to get these molecules into saleable products for market. The other 80% are all established off-the-shelf processes used across many industries. So solid-liquid separation, liquid-liquid celebration, or separation, distillation towers, the kind of equipment you can get from China, Korea, Vietnam, US, Europe. It's prevalent equipment that the user of the technology can basically shop around. I won't repeat some of the priorities here. So the six-ring process is also, I mean, the IP is in the chemistry and in the process. The engineering is also super simple. This is our pilot processing facility in Calgary, Canada. Those tanks you're seeing are 20-cube tanks. Those tanks are recycled from a dairy industry. They're just simple stainless steel tanks. Even the acids we use don't corrode the metal. They actually remarkably serve as a corrosion inhibiting impact on these tanks. It's tanks, it's pumps, it's conveyors. It's very, very simple tech. We're already at TRL 8. We are purchasing and converting a biodiesel facility in our backyard in southern Alberta. We have projects with partners under development in the UAE, Japan, Vietnam, and we're very close to having these to FID, where we can actually demonstrate to the world that we have projects that work. I'll skip through this really fast. The World Bank, one more minute. The World Bank had asked us to give a presentation for them to present to the Malaysian government. So basically, looking at the Malaysian case, with 100 million tons annually of waste lignocellulosic process, if one converted only 5% of this pre-accumulated biomass, one can produce 21 million barrels of liquid products with relatively low capex. In North America, that amount, that scale would be 25 or 2.5 to $3 billion. Now this says it's about a third in ASEAN. I think it's closer to 50 to 60% in ASEAN. But for 1.7 to just over $2 billion, one can produce 21 million barrels of energy. We were asked specifically to demonstrate how our technology can help Malaysia develop a SAF industry. Our liquid crude well, actually our cellulose in both cases can be converted to cellulosic ethanol, but we can also further process it into precursors for the HEFA process. So whether it's alcohol to jet or the HEFA process, this non-food sustainable cellulose can be a contributor to larger scale, lower cost SAF. And then what's really getting the markets excited and the project developers for the technology is, without refining, we can take our bio crude and convert that into a diesel drop-in that has significant benefits in terms of lubricity, conductivity, oxygenation, and can replace fossil-based diesel additive. So basically, operating like a similar product in gasoline. This is kind of self-explanatory. The biomass is here. We can bring technology to lower costs, increase output. Agree completely, Kyle, but we need partners to do it. We're a technology provider, so anybody here with a possible interest now or going forward, we'd love to talk to you. Thank you.
Now you can tell Ron's a former diplomat because he's a black belt in buying time. But the import of his speech is a key takeaway. There are breakthroughs that essentially change the game on different dimensions. Either they change the process, the processing game, the technology pathway, or they're able to utilize much lower cost resources and actually change the scale, which then is a big deal in the biomass world because, as all of you know, biomass is very, very expensive to transport because it has low energy density. So we're going to shift gears from green molecules into another critical area of decarbonization, which is thermal decarbonization. As all of you know, we're going to have very different and very higher temperature loads, which requires a lot of cooling, or other parts of Asia, a lot of heating if you're in the northern climates. So we're going to have more temperature extremes. And if we rely on sort of the current approaches to doing that, it's going to have a huge impact on the energy demand, especially electricity demand. So sometimes innovation can be applying proven and good business models in new and innovative ways to new geographies. So we're very excited to hear from the Dornier Group. Both Ilka and Tim will co-present the next session, and I think you'll be very pleased with what they have to say.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I have to see where we are. This is a new one. Very good teamwork as a duo. We're going to try this. Thank you very much, Kyle, for this introduction. Thank you very much, ADB, for organizing this stunning forum. Thank you all for coming to listen. Like Kyle said, this will be about heating. Tim and I, we represent the Dornier Group. Dornier provides services in strategic planning, design, implementation of infrastructure projects in energy, water, and transport all around the world. For the heating story, we have currently two kind of major focus points geographically. One in Germany, where there is a commitment to completely decarbonize heating by 2045. So there's a lot of work for us there now. And the other area happens to be Kazakhstan, where we've been supporting the legislation for the heat sector's transition there. And this also explains why our own examples, which will be given in the presentations, are all about heating. But we'll be happy to talk a little bit about cooling and how to apply later. So what we want to talk about is the starting point, the observation that heating is important for decarbonization. And then we're going to pick out one of the type of systems, which is called district heating or centralized district heating, which is the stuff which has these pipes on the ideally underground, often in Kazakhstan still overground, to transport the heat from one or several central places all around the city. And we're going to talk about how to make this sustainable as a design and how to implement that. So just to start with this observation about the importance of heating for decarbonization. Worldwide, heating accounts for, it's difficult to really know the statistics, but 50 or more % of what households used in energy. Yeah, so this is like half of what households use worldwide. Is currently, unfortunately, not decarbonized at all. 83%. These are the figures for Europe and Asia. Worldwide figures are probably very similar. Very far behind electricity sector. And yet in heating, the CO2 abatement costs are actually quite low. We have some own figures. You see them here, about 10 or even below $10 per ton reduction. So this is worthwhile doing, and also because of other issues for the society, the social cohesion, and so on. And once you decide to do it, the World Bank says there are 3 pillars what you should do. 1, reduce consumption. 2, decarbonize centralized district heating and extend it as much as possible. And 3, promote clean heating. So, and now we pick out the second pillar and we talk about district heating and how to make it more sustainable. Tim.
Thank you, Ilka. So I want to explore a bit the concept itself from district cooling or heating. I would like to skip a bit the text and just stress out the importance and the difference to electricity grids, because we do actually have to transport masses of water if we take water as the cooling or heating fluid, which makes it coming with a lot of restrictions that we have to place all the components locally in the near, because otherwise it gets a bit too expensive. And the concept itself, basically, first you have the demand of heat in a city or individual households. The higher the better, and more economically the system itself it is. Then you have to have these heat generators or the cooling generators, for example a collector field. And here I also want to stress out the difference to electricity generation. Heat generation can be in a very big variety. For example, you have industrial processes that still have to have a certain temperature, need cooling, and then the waste heat you can use. But also you can couple it with the electricity sector and use wind power or, for example, photovoltaic power. And due to the intermittent nature of the renewable resources, you always need to have a storage, which is also, if you just store water on a high temperature, cheaper than electricity storage. So this is basically the whole concept then connected with actual physical pipes, here visualized in with the yellow lines. And if we now dive into the components, as I already mentioned, there are many options basically to generate heat. So from direct solar radiation collectors, but also if you have any ambient heat available from rivers, lakes, sewage, groundwater, or the ambient air can be used, deep geothermal, and biomass we have here as well already. Then you have different technologies to generate the heat itself. You need the distribution system, the pipes itself, and of course you have to have a high density demand for the heat or the cooling, and planning optimization tools, because you always find one solution, but to actually find the optimal solution for the individual place is quite challenging. Now we brought 3 case studies from Germany where we basically have the heat demand in winter, and the story is usually always the same. You start with fossil fuel heat generation, so you burn coal or gas, use it for electricity generation, and then the waste heat you basically put into the pipes and deliver the heat to the homes and the apartments in the city. And if you have a closer look, actually every city has a certain potential set of renewable energies available. You just need to have a close look which is exactly the most economical. And we have brought 3 case studies, and here in the green you can see that the heat pump with environmental heat is always one of the solutions, even though the heat demand increased. Also in the next city we have only 270 households investigated. Here it's geothermal energy on a shallow basis, 100 meters deep only. And here was an industrial process for waste heat, which basically was the solution then to generate. And yes, with this I hand over to Ilka.
Yeah. So hopefully the slides will all be available to everybody, and we, you can ask us questions. Of course, it's anonymized because these were projects we actually did for a planning stage. Now, challenges. So technological challenges, Tim has talked about them quite a lot. Also the technologies themselves, they are still developing. There are many case studies, but the learning process is definitely going on. These sources are intermittent. They are often reliant on the weather, on solar, for example, or they are reliant on sewage, how much sewage there actually is, and this has to be properly investigated and taken into account. Geographically, literally every location is different, which is why, for example, German and also the Kazakh heat law say that there should be heat planning, it's compulsory, and there shouldn't be any projects which are, against this plan, which is made for 10 years, let's say, or 20 years. Administratively, this is a local thing, so the decisions have to be local, but of course the framework has to be set centrally, and also some support systems, support has to be done centrally. And financial. So when you calculate how much this kind of stuff costs, this beautiful new system with lots of sources, obviously, often there will be an increase in costs, and therefore, if you don't have subsidies in tariffs, but we need to bear in mind that this just shows, and the challenge is that in the location you're doing it, you suddenly reveal all the hidden subsidies which were before in the fossil fuel system, and you suddenly reveal it in heat tariffs for town X, and this is obviously problematic. Good news is that really there is, the train is going and it is gathering speed. And for some of these challenges, there are tools and instruments available to actually deal with it. So here you see kind of 4 major stages of the analysis. Of the heat of the existing demand, of the future demand, then the technology specific assessment, then the portfolio assessment. Yeah, the portfolio means how all these components work together in an optimal way, and then the technical economic assessment. And for all of these, there is a real there are some breakthroughs in models which are, really convenient to use it. But I think the toolbox, which you can see, the current one in the last column there, is still very much developing, and possibly we need lots of, or the heat industry and the cooling industry needs lots of additional minds and hearts and minds to develop this further. And so as a conclusion, like we said, decarbonizing heating is like very important, cooling as well. We can talk about this in the session now. This can actually contribute to the country's climate goals. I mean, we had a calculation again for Kazakhstan that if you do just some of the heat measures, like obvious ones, you can cover 70% of the Kazakhstan's Paris commitment. Reduction, like just from the heat industry. You don't have to touch, transport, electricity, whatever. This is all theoretical, it's like kind of you calculate and what you could do, but still it shows the scope. And also, this is really worthwhile doing. It's hard because it takes engagement, it's a diverse process, it takes smartness, but this is also good, isn't it? Because this is the new world. The new world will work with engagement, with smart tools, and with diversity. And therefore, we just invite everybody to join this process, and technologies and tools are already available. Let's develop them further, and let's decarbonize heating. Let's do action. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ilka and Tim. I think many of you are aware that a good portion of the Northern Asian areas within ADB are used actually coal for heating and electrification of heat. So this has, of course, tremendous potential, and there are some good efforts going on in China. And then similarly, reverse is still thermal. If we have to use electrification for cooling and the new cooling loads, we're going to be in a world of hurt, because that demand growth often makes it very hard for the renewables to actually catch up and to ultimately decarbonize the system. So again, there's some good pilots in Asia that are starting to happen around district cooling. So our next speaker is going to talk to a theme that is on several of the electrical systems mind, which is really, as we get to the next phase of renewable resources, we have to hybridize them. They have to meet a load profile. They have to be firm. They have to be more intelligent. They have to be more dispatchable. The technology is there, but there's a harmonization that needs to happen between the technology, the regulations, and the business models. So we're very honored to have Bagus Mudnera from Castle Rock speak to us on this very important subject.
Thank you for having us. So I'm presenting the study, and thank you for the Mentari project because it's funded by UK government for Indonesia. So this project gives us a kind of a lot of information about how to expedite and accelerate the energy transition from the hybrid technology. So I will focus on the how to unlock the hybrid solar PV and battery energy storage to energize off grid. So because we need to highlight that sometimes whenever we hybrid, it means the definition must be robust. I will discuss about the definition of the hybrid as a combine more than two of technologies. So we can combine PV, battery, and maybe existing diesel, or maybe we can combine biogas, wind, and battery energy storage. So we will focus on the battery and solar PV. And this context, we will kind of the replace of the diesel generation. Thank you from Val and colleague here as well. So the Indonesia actually still have a massive diesel generation. So we have a kind of more or less about 5,000 plus of diesel power plant, and it across to more than 2,000 off-grid location. And this escalating the fuel cost, emission, and aging infrastructure as well to make more the inefficient operation. So by having this one, so we would like to have a kind of this moving forward from the deterministic into the more advanced modeling. So we use the optimization, and we can discuss in a minute. But we need to understand about the cost structure. The cost structure of the hybrid, because this is going to be developed about the tariff by the end of the whenever we do the transaction. We need to understand about, okay, solar module is very significant, but the battery is most likely more or less about almost 50%. Whenever we discuss about the battery, you need to understand about what's the main objective to install the battery. It can be as kind of the smoothing to ensure that the energy is going to be like almost seemingly baseload or dispatchable, and or we can do as 100% RE whenever we have a without any diesel. It means during daylight we also produce and storage. So and store the project, store the energy. So then we can deliver overnight. It's also will drive the cost structure. And diesel generation itself, we need to understand whenever we still use this diesel generation, what's the pros and cons, and I will tell you in minutes. And balance of the system is better. Inverter, controller, switchgear now is getting cheaper, is 10 until 15%. And however, the installation and civil works, because we will deal with the off-grid, we will deal in the remote island, we will deal with the remote area, sometimes challenging. So whenever we try to model the cost, we can see whenever we highlight that, okay, our objective is abate the fossil fuel, kill the fossil fuel, and then 100% RE. What's the implication? But what if we don't want to use the RE and then we keep diesel? Our life is happy, something like this. And what is the consequences? We can see from the long term, it seems like in the slide, the price amazingly expensive. So we have a kind of option. Do we need to deal with the expensive in the future, or we can do with expensive at this time, because we need to have a massive capex. What is the implication? If we calculate the uncertainty of fossil fuel, more or less every 20 years, the cost of fossil fuel more or less double. Then we can calculate what's the implication. If we want to highlight about 100% of RE, the capex is so high, and then the cost or the tariff is also so high. Then what's the option? Then we try to model the system, and we found that 90% or 95% of the renewable energy fraction, while we are keeping the existing diesel as a backup, is the optimum one. So this is the lesson that we can take from this the study. Then, but the most important things, we need to have a kind of similar with the heating. We need to have a kind of the support from the government. At least there is a selling price or feed-in tariff. In the regime, then the country can accept the feed-in tariff. Maybe feed-in tariff is good, but if not, we can go with the selling price. The most important, maybe we can have a slightly higher at this moment, but for the long term, we can get a better position. So in the concept of the Indonesia, then we need, or maybe we can have concept with the bilateral PPA. The PPA is essential. However, sometimes traditional PPA most likely based on the capacity. But we need to move now because the capacity is rather obsolete. If we discuss about the VRE, then we go with energy. So that's the most fundamental that we found. Then selling price framework is essential to enable investment of on-grid hybrid gas. The implication is we move from the what we call the capacity base into the annual contracted energy base, supporting the agnostic technology. So we not focus, okay, I dislike or I hate the fossil fuel, but we are most likely agnostic. And then by using the actual contracted energy, the real energy needs will be better than the capacity-based model because we have no the take or pay or whatever. Then this is specifically whenever the country will boost or develop the local content requirement to boost the supply chain, domestic supply chain. The most important, the government need to have a kind of long-term vision, but consistent. That's the most important. This is the recommendation. There is a 5 recommendation from us. First, about the tariff flexibility. As I mentioned earlier, we deal with the off-grid. It means sometimes the cost of installation and also cost of access to the sites is very different. So adjust the tariff to reflect the location specific cost structure based on the logistic and civil works is going to be hard. The second is the allow dynamic pricing for the hybrid project. For the targeted incentive, we can offer the financial incentive, particularly for the battery energy storage, because the battery energy storage is very nascent at this moment. Even now, is with the technology wise, from the engineering perspective, it's going to be seeing it's already mature. And support local manufacturing and for the remote project is also essential. The long-term PPA with the actual contracted energy is going to be speeding up the transaction, and particularly for the dispatchability of the system. The cost reflective in pricing, reform selling price using this insight is very essential from our perspective. Incorporate the real hybrid system costs and the regional existing cost is also considerably important. Lastly is about what I said about the local content, support the domestic supply to strengthen the supply chain is going to be one of the enabling environment. Lastly is about the formula for calculator of grid must be established quite well. This is the last slide. Again, tariff flexibility, targeted incentive, long-term PPA is essential. Insight from this study underscore that the needs of core reflective pricing. Lastly is about selling price. It might be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Bagus. Yeah, I think, again, the findings are important because they reflect the economic realities of where the technology costs are now, and then the need to adopt both regulation but also our planning and thinking. And there's many island systems, of course, across Southeast Asia that are under sort of ADB auspices. So I think there's a lot of lessons here for that. So now we're going to pivot from presentations to the Q&A. Just a reminder, we have two ways for the audience to interact with our panelists. You can use the app, and they show up here, and we will address all of those. And so please feel free, don't be shy. Or you can also use the mic, or you can raise your hand, and they'll bring a mic to you. So we're going to have, I think, a rich discussion because we're covering three major verticals within the hard to decarbonize sector. But I want to start on what I said in the opening was the scarcest resource. This is really getting the customers and getting market pulls. So let's start with Charmaine at Boeing. Charmaine, what activities, initiatives is Boeing launching in Southeast Asia to really create market pull for SAF, given your extensive customer base in the airlines?
Thank you for the question, Carl, and good afternoon, everyone. Charmaine here, so I lead Boeing Sustainability in Southeast Asia markets. I also co-chair the Environment and Sustainability Committee at the American Chamber of Commerce in Singapore. So I think in terms of what Boeing is doing in the region, when we refer to SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuels in short, it is actually a drop-in fuel that can be used in our existing aircraft, and it can be blended up to 50% as of today. But looking out to 2030, we've committed to a 100% target for all of our commercial aircrafts to be able to cope with 100% SAF on both engines. So in terms of how we're looking at really accelerating the entire value chain of SAF, we work across the entire chain, starting from, say, feedstock, which Sachin has given us a very good bird's eye view on what's available in this region. We see that Southeast Asia has sufficient feedstocks here to meet all of its own jet fuel needs. But then the question is, how do we unlock the potential of this feedstock? How do we harness on it? Right? So looking at the feedstock front, we've engaged, we've worked with GHD and also another study, phase one, so two studies in the past 1 year, in terms of raising that level of awareness of, what are the types of feedstock that can be harnessed for SAF. So that's on the research front. On the policy front, we recognize that this region is extremely highly policy active. Maybe just a show of hands. How many of you flew in from the EU or Singapore or Indonesia? Okay, we've got quite a number of you. So if we look at, where we're at with the SAF policies in this country, as of this year, the EU has implemented a 2% SAF mandate, meaning to say if you're flying in from the EU, you're paying 2% on your flight tickets. And from next year onwards, if you're flying in from Singapore, there's a 1% SAF levy. They'll be reflected in your flight ticket when you book your flights. So we're seeing this momentum where a lot of regulators are sending that demand signal on the need to start accelerating on SAF. So what Boeing is doing in the region is also getting, as a regional approach, ensuring that as consumers, passengers ourselves, as we choose to fly, or whether it's for work or for our vacations, we don't want to be in a situation where we are caught in a very distorted market where various airports have different targets and mandates. So my work on the ASEAN level, encouraging the regulators to think of a regionally harmonized approach. So engaging with the ministers, the ASEAN ministers, and on the ASEAN Air Transport Working Group. So that's on the policy front. And in terms of thinking about how do we unlock finance to take it to the next level, right? Sachin brought us through HEFA pathway, which is the most prevalent today. Boeing led the research approval for the HEFA pathway. But we want to be thinking about what are the next steps, what kind of new technologies can we unlock? So in this region, we also run a series of SAF financing roundtable. We've done it in Australia, Singapore, Japan. And the reason for doing so is so that we bring the finance community together on the same table with feedstock producers, technology providers, to understand what are the perceived risks and what are the actual risks around the investments. So that's kind of in a nutshell for now, but I'm happy to share more as we go along.
Thank you, Charmaine. Ron, I'm going to ask you a similar question, which is sort of the customer side. What's unusual about your technologies is not just fuels, it's actually green molecules. So it covers a number of different products that are in the hard to decarbonize sector because it includes chemicals and a wider range of fuels. Where are you starting to see from the customer side market interest and market traction for this kind of offering?
I think a challenge that we're all facing is that we're competing in the transport fuel side. We're competing with very, very efficient 100-year-old industry from oil and gas. And to make a dent in that for replacement fuels, we have to be a lot more cost competitive. We have to be able to gradually start competing at price with the fuels that are out there. Policy instruments and the work Boeing's doing and the, the initial steps that governments are doing are helpful as a catalyst to boost this. But ultimately, we're going to need to bring the costs down. And I think that's what's generating a lot of interest in our discussions. It's interesting that the projects that we have under development, again, so a sugar manufacturer in India using bagasse, state-owned enterprises in UAE using date palm waste, Japan, it's bamboo with a mid-sized refiner, Vietnam, it's a forestry company. We're having those discussions because our technology has economics that don't require subsidies to be able to be cost competitive. And the reason it doesn't need subsidies is that we can cross-subsidize, if you will, by having some high-value products that can compensate for the much more commodity-based prices for the sustainable fuels. All that said, it sounds great on paper, and it is, but we don't have a commercial demonstration facility yet, so that's always going to be a constraint. Everybody wants to see production at scale in the real world that's actually selling products in the market, and that's the big push that we have now. Once we get over that hump, which we're making progress on, I think next year's ASEF, when we're here, we'll have at least a couple projects to FID, and we will likely, or there's a good chance we'll have a small operating facility in Alberta in the purchase and conversion of a small biodiesel facility. The other advantage we have for players, and this is playing out in the UAE, for example, we have an ability to start in relatively small scale and build because we use tanks and pumps. An operation can start with 50 tons a day or even 25 tons a day. The economies of scale are not brilliant, but it can make a profit with that. And if it's working, they can move to 100, 250, 1,000 tons a day more gradually and sort of build up their comfort level. So it's a very different conversation than most of the technologies out there. But because it's so different, it also takes a while for people to get their heads around the fact that this is a novel new technology, very different from what's out there now.
Thank you, Ron. That was very thoughtful. Ilka and Tim, I imagine it's on everyone's mind, knowing that the thermal district heating can really work and is proven, about who are the customers? Do you have to have an entire municipality join, or can you have a smaller group of customers that have enough critical thermal loads to pull this technology forward? What's your experience in getting these things off the ground?
There is, we come from quite a tradition of district heating, which makes it kind of easy. And there are also kind of some thresholds at what density of demand district heating could work. It's not very precise, but there are some sort of guidance figures, let's say. And of course, it's always better you have a diverse mix. So normally you have a city which has some commercial, like, I don't know, shops and malls and industry a bit, and then it has houses, and this all gets heated ideally by an efficient system. And it's the same in Kazakhstan, for example. I think 60% of households are heated by district heating in Kazakhstan. So it's a very high number. This is all a legacy from socialist times. But of course, look at Denmark, look at Sweden, which didn't have that legacy, and still the district heating is really, really increasing, especially in Denmark. Even the like single houses, not just multi-storage, but they get connected to the district heating system because it's so efficient and it does work. And of course, CO2 is priced in to everything in Denmark. And so, clearly, I think this is the main thing. The main thing is what do you achieve by creating heat or the or cold in a centralized, bigger process, as opposed to doing it all in each house. I think this is this is the economics, and it's not straightforward, and it really depends on even like things like for example, in Kiev, it's very hilly, yeah. So that system, also district heating, is incredibly complicated because of all the pumping, and the ground is very special and so on. So it's really it depends on the locality, which is why the main thing is each kind of municipality or each settlement, I don't know what you want to call it, where people live, basically needs to do this analysis from the bottom up. Literally look, what is the demand of heat or cold, right? Where is it distributed? What are the local conditions? What are the sources which are available? And of course, here we do have technological differences between heating and cooling. So I don't know if maybe that's the next question, or you want to go there.
Well, I was going to add, in part of my former incarnation, I ran an investing fund. We actually invested in the district cooling for the city and county of Honolulu. And what we found for seawater cooling was that if you had like you said, you have to have diversification. You had the commercial core of the buildings, the state and all the offices, the banks, whatnot, and the shopping malls to get a kind of a base load. If they signed up contractually, that was enough to get the financing. And once you have that core, then you can extend out to the adjacent residential areas. So I think the message I want to share with the group as you're starting to think about this is that you don't have to have everything all at once. You can get things financed in a phased way and get customers to make, again, long-term commitments. This is a long-term capital project. And that becomes very reasonable to get these off the ground. So don't be daunted by the scale of what this can be, but be excited about how quickly you can actually get it in place.
I would also like to add something. Exactly the time frame that we are considering in Germany is about 20 years, so that's quite a long time frame. And also coming back to the question from which heat demand it's economically sensible basically to install a heating network, it's also coming from the other end. If you really have to decarbonize and you have a system based on gas now, but you have a gas network, then the question comes also, what is the alternative to district heating, which is then exactly electricity, either with ambient air heat pump or direct electricity heating. So it's either increasing electricity grid investments or the district heating. And sometimes the whole electricity grid is already at its limited capacity, and then the district heating itself might have not been the most economical option, but with other restrictions than it is. And coming now to the cooling side, actually, I think in Singapore there's a cooling network where they also have a reduced electricity demand by 30%, so it's even more cost effective if you make it centralized than if you have one small cooling unit at every window, basically, because big generation plants are usually more efficient.
Now let me also turn, we have great questions in the inbox, but also before we address these, are there any live questions from the audience that you'd like to raise? If so, go ahead, please. Can you bring the mic to him, please? Or you can stand up.
Sorry, I was trying to type this when I'm too slow. My question is addressed to a gentleman from Indonesia. You have presented the hybrid PV BESS system for higher share of renewable energy. My question is about the battery. What kind of battery you can use to bring the share of renewable energy to 20, 50, 100%? I understand that in that higher range and that scenario, you would need long duration energy storage, and the cost would be very different from the current available technologies. So I want to have clarification on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the good question. So first of all, there is many options of the type of technology. But now we discuss about the utility scale of battery. In the discussion utility scale of battery, we can use like a lithium ion. But for the electric vehicle, it's different because it depends on the how many the frequency of charging. And most likely in the utility scale, we are thinking about 4,000 and the minimum 4,000. And whenever we do the modeling, the size of whenever we between, so we start at 50%, go with the 70%, go up to until 100%. So we use the similar technology while we deal with the different size of the battery. So we say what we call them whenever assume that we are a bit deep dive into the power modeler. The power modeler will put what we call the autonomy hours. So whenever we set or hybrid the solar with the battery, there is several options. First of all, we would like to only utilize the solar PV during daylight, and then while during night, we will use the battery, the reuse energy from the diesel, shall we say. It means we use the battery only for smoothing. But the smoothing, we need to have a kind of the, what we call autonomy hour for minimum 1 until 2 hours. Because during the daylight, sometimes suddenly it's raining or suddenly it's going to be like a cloudy. The second option, what we call it load shifting. So we have a power during daylight, and then we cater the demand, plus we store. So as I mentioned earlier, it means the size of the battery is essential. But if we try to do the red dogs as well. But the red dog is sometimes the price is still a bit high. Thank you.
I just want to add, as you look globally at high renewable penetration systems at the electrical system level, so if you look at northern Germany, or if you look at, say, California, both where they are now and where their targets, it's absolutely clear that you have to have long duration energy storage to be able to address actually the weather variance. You can have, you know, dark skies or stormy skies, or you can have wind lulls. That's also true for Ireland, where you have to have much longer duration storage. There's a lot of both venture capital activity, a fair amount of state subsidies that are going into the demonstration projects over the, say, the last 2 years and probably the next 3 years to try to get these to a commercial scale. There's a few that are already there, but it's a very astute question. Are there other questions from the audience before we turn to the ones online? So let me turn to the online questions. And we have several. I'm going to cluster them a little bit. So first to both Ron, but also to Sachin, there's a question of whether these technologies, whether sig-string technologies, the technologies looked at, could also, in their product slate, be applied to marine diesel. Sort of scope-free emissions, think of it that way.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the advantages, of course, is marine diesel is going to be at a lower grade. I mean, the diesel that we can pull out of our system now without refining can have marine applications. Again, I'm not the chemist or the fuel engineer, but we're having increasing number of discussions around that diesel product. And again, that diesel product, I understand once you get beyond sort of 10%, the oxygen levels might be too high, but 1%, 3%, 5% drop in without refining, it can be done immediately out of the process, highly economical. So while it doesn't solve all challenges around climate change, I mean, many of our solutions are longer term. They're changing infrastructure, they're bringing costs down. This is at least a modest way bringing a biofuel into the market relatively fast at accessible cost to start bringing down the carbon intensity of a major transport industry. And if, you know, altering the climate change impacts of diesel across a society or across a sector by 3% in the short term is a big step forward in a situation where we have just many challenges that are going to take a lot of time and money.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. And yeah, just want to second those points and agree. I think when we talk about these technologies and talk about the sort of feedstocks, I think we're solving a problem that's not, there's no silver bullet for, say, one technology, and we're going with marine biomass, but that definitely has a place. And I think you know, the hydrothermal liquefaction and then potentially with the six-ring technology, that's one avenue of decarbonisation. So when we think about the technology that's available, we're looking at it, what slate of feedstocks we can handle. So we sort of need to explore all these options to it's sort of that wedge theory where one technology won't complete the whole wedge. It's a multiple wedges that will solve the problem.
Excellent. This is for Professor Lewington and her colleague Tim, and it's a two-part question. So, because thermal, of course, has heating and cooling. So I'll start with the heating, and then there's a similar question that will relate to the cooling. So on the heating, one of the big goals for, I think, ADB and all of us is to try to accelerate the retirement of coal plants. And so you mentioned in your talk that you looked at Kyrgyzstan and that decarbonizing the heating sector reduced 70% progress on goals. Of course, it's a cold climate. Could you expand more on the role of district heating in Kyrgyzstan and sort of the economic realities of that? Because I think it's very interesting for our audience. And there's a second part, which is going to be about cooling in the other warmer parts of Asia. But let's start with the colder parts.
Yeah, so I guess really Kazakhstan is quite a unique case in terms of its climate and also in terms of their heritage from Soviet times, socialist times, where it was the done thing, you know, to have district heating in urban settings. So it's like the standard, and therefore the acceptance is of course extremely high, and everybody wants to connect to the district heating system in, you know, new houses, and some people, you know, connect illegally. I don't quite know how, but it obviously messes up everything. But the hydraulics and so on, you know. But so it's very accepted. Now it is of course heavily subsidized directly through the coal, which is still subsidized, and certainly there are no carbon, tax or anything like that on that coal. Certainly not for heating, and also the tariff itself. There's a lot of subsidization, cross-subsidization between what budget entities pay, schools, and so on, and what the population pays. But still, the acceptance is very high, and the infrastructure is there. So every city has got these pipes. They're in different condition, but you know, some are quite reasonable and could be really brought up to speed, at least to, you know, lower the losses, which sometimes might be 35% of heat losses in the network, which is obviously crazy. Then like a normal thing in Sweden or so is, let's say, 10%, because you do lose some, because like Tim said, it is actual water, you know, going through quite big pipes. You have big surfaces. Even if you insulate, you do lose some in these temperatures. But yeah, so measures like, I just said, quite simple measures at actually, you know, leakage detection, at, you know, retrofitting it with insulation, and then doing something to the plants, optimizing, for example, how they use the mix between CHP, which is combined heat and power, and heat boilers, which are there to just optimize the regimes, what they call in Russian, so like the you know, the way you run these, by coordinating what maybe different owners see as their priority. You know, some might just want to trade on the electricity market, and then they, you know, mess up the whole, which would be what would be optimal for the heating system. And so measures like these, kind of quite simple measures of improving the actually still coal-based generation, of changing some to gas. So when you have something which is completely outdated and needs to be actually closed, and then you would switch it to gas, even LNG. We had one case where we would transport LNG 100 kilometers from a base, and still it was the best option to convert to gas-fired boilers in this one city. So if you theoretically you know, scale up all these measures, simple measures, the figure we got was that about 70% of Kazakhstan's Paris reduction commitment could be served by these measures. That kind of was the figure, and obviously the calculation is, you know, quite theoretical. But yeah, I don't know, this answered it a bit.
The second part of the question is, if you turn now to cooling and district cooling, are there particular either sectors or geographies that you think in the warmer parts of Asia would be good candidates for looking at this?
Yes, definitely. High urban areas where you have a lot of cooling demand. And the difference to the heating is also you need the cooling in tropical regions 24/7 all year long, so which is quite interesting. And also in the urban areas, you basically save space. You do not heat up the urban area itself, because if the cooling system in a small unit is outside of the window of a big building, then basically it's 50, 60 degrees waste heat coming from the room inside, heating up the whole city more or less, and that you can dispatch to place it more outside of the city. So every time where we have a high density demand, either in heat or in cooling, the centralized system is probably very economic, feasible.
We have several questions really for across the panelists that relate to two things that go together. One is this issue of actions that can be taken to de-risk the path from, you know, the sometimes emerging stage or later stage technologies to the scaling, and that in some ways can and then inside of that as well, are there roles that ADB can play? And I think we might start with you, Charmaine, to sort of doing so much partnering and networking around this, how to bring these staff into being. What your sense is of, look, what are some good models that can get that kind of coordination, cooperation to de-risk, and then what role can the bank play or other MDBs play in that? And then other panelists, please feel free to speak up.
That's a really good question. I think in terms of de-risking, one aspect would be definitely thinking about effective policy measures. We've seen a couple of good examples. So, for example, in the UK, they've got this thing called the Revenue Certainty Mechanism. So, which means that there's a strike price that is established in terms of, you know, what is the price of SAF. So then the producer enters into a contract that is backed up with a third party that is backed by the government, and that provides that certainty, right, to the producers in terms of, you know, also reducing the financial risk. In terms of the role of, you know, what MDBs can play, definitely tremendous role here. We've talked a lot about, I think this couple of days we've heard a lot about blended finance. I think particularly around a SAF example. Fairly recently, ADB has made an announcement on, I think it's 86.2 million financial package to support a SAF production facility in Pakistan. And this is really interesting, because when you look at, you kind of unpack what was the thought process that went behind ADB's decision to, you know, embark on this investment, was that there's a clear connection through the value chain. So first of all, the feedstock, they're using used cooking oil, which is one that is, widely accepted today and can be used as a drop-in fuel. So there is certainty around the supply of the feedstock. And then, in terms of who's then going to be the off-taker buying the SAF, they've got Shell committed to an off-take agreement. So I think that essential component in terms of looking at the entire value chain and how it connects, that's very important.
I mean,
Other panelists?
for us to bring down GHG emissions to a stage where we're no longer destroying the world is going to need a lot of innovation. It's going to mean risk taking. It's going to mean trying things. Not all those things are going to work. And commercial banks are just not going to do this. And conventional investors are going to be cautious on a lot of this. So this is where, I mean, the ADB in some of their risk sharing financing to help de-risk part of the calculation on the part of lenders and investors is just so critical. It's also in the testing and validation phase where the commercial banks and investors just kind of aren't there. Like we're doing engine testing with the government of Canada in Ottawa with our diesel fuel, 1%, 3%, 5%. I mean that's a $200,000 initiative. We're putting in money, but it's workable because in this case, the government of Canada and the provincial government that I'm part of is putting in some money. So it's making it doable. If we were all on our own, we just wouldn't get there. And to get offtake or to get end users to put our product, which comes from a feed source which is completely different from what they're used to in terms of fossil fuel-based fuels, into their engines, they're going to want a high degree of certainty. And SAF is just a whole nother multiple levels above that. This just takes time. We can take our bio-crude and convert that, and we're confident we can convert that into another SAF pathway. But the minimum cost is like $3 million with GE Aviation and others that we've spoken to. Like that is just for us, for a technology company, really difficult. So public sector, multilaterals, with sometimes relatively small investments can do a lot to catalyze the technologies and make them acceptable to a market and to prove them out. And also to prove out when they don't work so people don't waste their time, including those that are developing the innovation. So that public-private sector partnership, particularly in the early stage, is critical.
Ilko or Tim, are there, from your experience, are there roles for ADB to play in helping accelerate or de-risk district heating or cooling?
So what we thought about this issue, how to de-risk, and we really think it's diversification, because there is, these systems need in most cases, multiple sources certainly to be explored and probably also to be applied. And these technologies, they are not new, but still in some of their scaling, like heat pumps or big storage, seasonal storage or something, it is relatively new. So I think the costs are still going to come down, but only if people start implementing it. And what I wanted to say about, and also another factor is step by step. Luckily, the district heating and probably cooling is something you can do in stages, really. And you can have, I think, proper projects which are, or stages of bigger systems, but you can make it work as a, as a fully ready project. And therefore, just this part of the city, or just this, couple of streets, this kind of area, and then the next one, and the next one. And but of course, this requires from somebody like ADB to be open for many relatively small projects, possibly, where they help to finance it, because of course they won't finance it entirely. It should go through tariffs and also country support mechanisms or so on, but ADB can help. But it will be lots of projects, and obviously the counterpart will not be the central government. It will be some local municipal heating company or cooling company, and all the issues around that, how to make that work for a loan from ADB, or even I don't know, part of assets or something. So I think this is a challenge for big donor organizations to face up to this localness, and that it's in stages and that it needs to be diverse. It's not just one big plant which you can put there, finance, and then it's nice. It's like, a heat pump here and a little bit here, and help to utilize the industrial waste heat from here, and modernize the network so that it doesn't lose 35%. So this is the kind of project. It's complicated, and probably for the lender kind of takes more resources, I suppose. So.
There's two questions for you, and I'll try to put them together. One's technical and one's sort of over time. So in your hybrid system, when you continue the diesel, does the diesel run through the best to optimize efficiency? And then the second part of the question is, if you do a partial diesel system, then over time, do you already plan to phase the diesel out at a future date?
Thank you. So basically, if we want to do the new technology, sometimes our difficulties is always, our mind is always, I don't want to have a kind of the too expensive option. We are always like least cost in our brain. So it's humane. So that's why the option to have a kind of, shall we say, keep 95% of the renewable energy fraction as our objective function while we still running for the diesel for 5%. It is a maximum in a year. So it means sometimes, because we rely on the earth, so we don't know whether tomorrow is raining or tomorrow doesn't have any sunshine. So that's the beauty, that we still have a diesel generation. So we keep the diesel as a minimum as we can. And the second question, if the diesel is running too low, then how about the FFG? So it's too many technical. How about to maintain the efficiency or the consumption of the diesel as well? So we need to think about that as well. And our calculation, the OPEX operation for the maintaining the diesel, it's even only 5%, it's slightly higher. To maintain that at least until 20 years, this diesel is still operation. That's the case. But in the best case, if we would like to replace or retrofit the fuel, it is also doable. But in our case, our study is for the off-grid in remote area and remote island. We are in our study, we still think that it's not doable until 10 years. But because maybe hydrogen is going to be moving around, then it's going to be straightforward. That's our assumption. Even if it's not the question for me, I think the ADB as a multilateral development bank can also playing a very specific intervention on this on off-grid, because sometimes off-grid is the very marginal, and it is similar. It's not the big, massive, intensive capital. It is sometimes the scale is very small, tiny, and it's not medium. So that's why sometimes the risking on this scalability of the financing is going to be very, very delighted to have a kind of the MDD jump in with the blended finance, because with the ADB provide the financing of facilities. I do hope that the private and domestic or local banks is also wants to chip in this investment. So lastly, about the battery combined with the diesel generation, sometimes we can do with what we call it a long-term lease agreement or long-term service agreement. So to maintain this facility still on the good shape while we optimizing the OPEX. Thank you.
Excellent. So I want to give a closing statement around, I think, what you've heard today and what we hope as a group you've taken away. You know, we try to address hard to decarbonize sectors in areas that aren't normally traditionally part of the discussion, but have to be. So we've addressed fuels, chemicals, thermal, and then some of the diesel replacement opportunities and off-grid systems. I think that a key takeaway in every one of these is that there are models out there, technology models, business models, approaches with what we have today and the economics that work today that can get us a meaningful start to really tackling these industries. But as I think all of us will agree, it actually takes a lot of partnership and cooperation across the whole value chain, you know, from especially with our customers, but with the raw materials and technology providers. And then, yes, there's a role for government, provide consistent frameworks, and there's a role for the financial side, provide innovative capital, as our other session said, to sort of allocate and de-risk. So I want to thank all of you for your kind attention. I want to thank my panelists especially for their insights and thoughts. And I'm standing between you and lunch, so I will end here. And thanks, everyone.